The Mandalorian Chapter 23, The Spies, is one of my favorite episodes of the series. I want to acknowledge that I was lucky enough to see it at Star Wars Celebration last week, and I think part of my love is absolutely the fact that I got to watch it in a room full of thousands of Star Wars fans who were laughing and cheering and gasping along with me. I was vibrating as I walked out of the room, singing along to the credits music, but seriously, this episode had just about everything I love about the series for 50 minutes straight. The action was awesome, the jokes were funny, the plot developments were intriguing, Rick Famuyiwa's direction knocked it out of the park. Chapter 23 is what it looks like when this series is firing on all cylinders, so let's dive into it. The first 8 minutes alone had me so pumped up. We start off with Elia Kane walking through Coruscant, and the tone felt a lot like the opening scene of Andor, dark and broody with the music of the Star Wars underworld playing as a lone figure walks through the rain, just putting me into that mindset that we're gonna be dealing with some heavier stuff this episode. But I love that The Mandalorian leans into the pulp and weirdness of Star Wars a little bit more. Having Kane meet up with a probe droid was a cool touch, not exactly inconspicuous, but whatever, I thought it was cool. And there we finally catch up with Moff Gideon. It seems like being arrested at the end of Season 2 didn't affect him at all, which, yeah, I'm not crazy about that. I mentioned this in previous episode reviews, how every major development of the Season 2 finale has been undone, and much of it happened off-screen. That's more of a criticism of the overall season than this episode that I'll talk about more in my Season 3 review, because for now, I'm just psyched to have the character back. Giancarlo Esposito is simply an actor that elevates every episode he is in. Kane tells him that Bo-Katan teamed up with the Children of the Watch to take down the pirates on Navarro, who are now confirmed to be in league with the Imperial Remnant. Bo-Katan has been talking about how Mandalorians and all their various factions fighting against one another has made them weak, but it should be pointed out that there are probably outside forces that help stoke those divisions. Outside enemies like Moff Gideon want them to be fighting one another and not him. And the same is true in the real world. People in power are quick to single out a group and say, oh, look out, they're here to take your jobs or threaten your culture or some other lie. They will stoke fear to cause division because they know if people are able to set aside their differences and get along, we will become more powerful than they can possibly imagine. And it should also be noted that there are divisions amongst those who hold power as well. We explore that as Gideon walks through several laser gates flanked by new stormtroopers into an Imperial Shadow Council. We've heard about several Imperial warlords, but now we're seeing that they're actually all working together, at least on the surface, as one mustached officer says they need to keep their true strength a secret. The second I saw him, I asked out loud, is that Pellaeon? And when his name was spoken, I pumped my fist and cheered. Grand Admiral Thrawn's right-hand man from the Legends books in the flesh. Well, holographic flesh, but still, it's him, and the casting is perfection. Pellaeon tells all the Imperials they need to appear as if they are unorganized, independent warlords, or else the New Republic will hunt them down, because again, unity is a threat. But the thing about the Empire or the dark side is that true unity is never really achieved. I love that each Imperial looks unique. They've all got a little extra flair to their uniform. Yes, they're all talking about working together, but visually there are clues that show what's going on under the surface that are put on the table by Gideon. He points out that Thrawn is constantly missing from their meetings and suggests maybe someone else should be leading the Imperial Remnant, a suggestion that other Imperials seem eager to explore, because they're all likely thinking about themselves in that new seat of power. The Empire and the Sith and the dark side in general respect power. If you can take power, it's yours. That's how the rule of two works. You need someone truly powerful enough to sit at the top to wrangle everyone beneath them. That's what Palpatine was for the Sith and the Empire. But Sith apprentices always want to overtake their masters, and Imperials always want to step on one another to rise in the ranks. When Gideon is accused of not staying in his lane, running his own cloning experiments, which we know he is, he says, oh no, never. Everyone here only does what they're told, right? And everyone quickly says, oh yeah, totally, for sure. In my mind, every single one of them is plotting their own power grab while they wait for Thrawn to fully reveal himself, but I do think that when the time comes, he will be able to unite the Imperial Remnant under his banner. That's part of what makes him so dangerous. But in the meantime, Gideon convinces the Shadow Council that he needs resources to stop the Mandalorians from returning to their homeworld, and they all agree to send him Praetorian guards and more starfighters. Well, I just talked for like 5 minutes about the opening scene. We just now reached the title card, but that is the power of Moff Gideon and Giancarlo Esposito. Cutting over to Navarro, Bo-Katan's fleet arrives to join forces with the Children of the Watch. Bo-Katan hopes they can all get along because what little both groups know of each other, they hate, even though they've never actually met. And if that doesn't continue the themes of division versus unity, I don't know what does. As Yoda says, fear is the root of hate and suffering. People tend to fear what they don't know or understand, and that fear will lead to hatred of entire groups of people they've never even met. All they see is someone different, and hatred leads to suffering. In the case of the Mandalorians, they have suffered in exile, scattered around the galaxy and hiding because they find it so difficult to accept one another's cultural differences, despite all being Mandalorians at their core. They immediately divide themselves into teams of helmets and no helmets, but the Armorer tries to squash the beef by welcoming Bo-Katan's group. And then Greef Karga takes Din and Grogu back to his office for a gift. The Anzellans have rebuilt IG-11 as a mech that can be piloted by Grogu. I've noted how Greef treats Grogu like a fun grandfather back in Season 2, and this continues that trend, giving the baby a potentially dangerous yet cool present. And then the yes and no buttons, seeing him express his joy of having extra mobility as he walks around the office and then the city, it's so silly and goofy, and I loved it all. Back at the camp, the Mandalorians continue tolerating one another as Bo-Katan explains her plan to return to Mandalore with a scouting party, and she demands volunteers from both groups. Of course, Din joins her, and then one by one we see some familiar faces agree as well. Casca Reeves, Axe Woves, Paz Vizsla, the Armorer, and then a bunch of people we've never seen before that I was like, okay, there's all the cannon fodder, or red shirts if you're a Star Trek fan, but still, it's a good scene. And then we quickly jump over to Mandalore, and I love how quickly this episode moved. They don't scout long until they're found by a ship gliding across the surface that carries Mandalorian survivors, who have apparently been there since the Purge. And then we learn how Moff Gideon got his hands on the Darksaber. Bo-Katan attempted to surrender when the Empire threatened to destroy all Mandalorian life. He accepted, and then bombed the planet anyway, which is kind of how I figured it went down, but it was nice to have that confirmed. The next scene between Din and Bo on the ship is really nice. She doesn't get into details about her time with Death Watch, but she does admit that her own past selfishness helped contribute to the fall of her world. She knows now that Mandalorians need to be united rather than divided, but she can also see how her past with Death Watch and her own division with her own sister paved the way to the near destruction of her people. She fears the Darksaber won't be enough to keep even her small group of Mandalorians united, and I love what Din says in return, that he doesn't care about the weapon. It means nothing to him. He cares about living with honor, loyalty, character. That is a huge step for him. Obviously, he still has some rules and traditions that are important to him, but some of the first words he said to Bo-Katan after she saved his life were, "You are not Mandalorian." And now he's starting to recognize which parts of the way are truly important and universal. Next up, the Armorer says she will take some of the weakest of the Mandalorian survivors back up to the fleet in orbit while the rest of them travel to the Great Forge. On the voyage, Axe and Paz play Mandalorian chess together and argue over, you guessed it, the rules. They have different rules for their culture, they also have different rules for this game, but it is still the same game, and they would rather fight one another than learn about a new version of this game they both enjoy, until the youngest and smallest among them steps in and breaks them up. That moment got cheers in the audience. It is so good. It takes the comedy of the yes and no buttons and turns it into something genuinely emotional, but it all reminds me of the Clone Wars quote, "Evil is not born, it is taught." The same can be said of division. Children are not set in their ways. They are eager to learn about the world around them. They are accepting by nature. It's what we are taught as we grow up that leads to division and fear, and Grogu, the foundling, is able to see that, and he's also using the lessons he learned from a Jedi, an ancient enemy of Mandalore, to bring peace. I love everything about that moment. And then a giant monster erupts out of the ground and destroys the ship, but most of the Mandalorians escape, and Paz and Dax work together to get Grogu to safety. To be a little critical of this episode that I truly love, I do think some events came out of nowhere. The Mandalorian survivors just appearing on the ship seemed awfully convenient, and then the huge monster literally appears out of the ground. Very often when I'm writing about this series, one scene will flow well into the next because they each deal with the consequences of what came before. Big old monster popping up out of the ground is just a flashy way to get the Mandalorians off the boat and into the Great Forge, which is fine, but it did give me pause. Once they're inside, they hear jetpacks and they're attacked by those new stormtroopers, which at first I was like, okay, this is kind of coming out of nowhere again, but it's not the case this time. The stormtroopers were established early on, and I loved the reveal, piece by piece, that Moff Gideon has established a secret base on Mandalore. I speculated after Season 2 that it would be Grand Admiral Thrawn hiding out here, but I like this just as well. Watching them fight their way through the ruins, which became less and less rocky and more Imperial, that's great stuff. But of course, the whole thing winds up being a trap. Gideon captures most of the Mandalorians within 2 doors, and Din is stuck on the other side. The Moff reveals himself in the latest version of the Dark Trooper armor, this time made of Beskar, but most importantly, it holds him inside, which just shows his hubris. In Season 2, Dr. Pershing said making them droids and removing the human element was what made them so dangerous, but of course Gideon doesn't see things like that. He doesn't see himself as a weakness. He talks about his plan to combine the strengths of Mandalorians, Jedi, and cloners to create a new army to bring order to the galaxy. He is definitely setting himself up to be a rival of Thrawn's. He orders the destruction of the fleet in orbit above the planet, takes Din off to a debriefing room, and demands the Darksaber be handed over to him once again. But Paz says this is the way, as if to say we're not surrendering, but we're also not simply going to die a warrior's death here together. Bo-Katan cuts a path free while Paz protects the rear, and as he decides to stay behind to buy the others some time, he says it one more time. I have been talking all season about how sometimes a Mandalorian will say, this is the way, and it makes me roll my eyes because it's about some silly rule. Why do I have to eat by the fire alone? I don't know, this is the way. Sometimes saying that means nothing, but other times it means everything, and this is the ultimate expression of that, when Paz Vizsla sacrifices his life for the future of his people, when he stays behind and fights so hard his blaster melts, and then beats the rest of the stormtroopers with his bare hands. It is so cool. Of course, the other shoe has to drop as the Praetorian Guard make their presence known, so not only do we give Paz an amazing last stand moment, but we also show how dangerous the Guard are going to be in future episodes. And that's all we have left to talk about, the future, the season finale. First, I just love that this time it's Din who has been captured and Grogu is going to have to save his dad and not the other way around. I kind of expect Din is going to be made an apostate again by having his helmet forcibly removed, and he'll have to decide whether or not he wants to put it back on, or if it's enough for him to simply live with honor and loyalty and character. I also think we're probably going to find out why this episode was called The Spies. Elia Kane is certainly a spy who was in one scene, but who are the spies plural? I gotta say, I have bad vibes coming off of the armorer. I mean, I have for a while, but it sure is convenient that she got off the boat when she did, right before she would have returned to the Great Forge, that place she talked about so wonderfully a couple episodes ago. Kinda sus, armorer. But Gideon did seem genuinely annoyed that her covert teamed up with Bo-Katan's, and we have seen her fighting stormtroopers before. I'm also suspicious of the survivors from the boat. The fact that they came out of nowhere and then offered to lead everyone directly to the forge does not look great for them. Finally, let's talk about Grand Admiral Thrawn. I do think there is a chance we could see him next week. Gideon made a big deal about his absence. He clearly wants to be the leader and is working overtime to make that happen. I think it would be thematically relevant to have Thrawn come in to shut down a threat to his own power by destroying Gideon. Not necessarily killing him, just putting him back in line. It would be a good mirror to the Mandalorians all uniting while the Imperials continue struggling to do so. And I think it's interesting timing that they did show Thrawn in the Ahsoka trailer at Celebration. They had to know that would leak, and it did. Ahsoka doesn't come out until August, but they may have given audiences at Celebration a glimpse of what he looks like only a few days before his true on-screen reveal. I'm getting into tinfoil hat territory, but I could see it happening. But yeah, what a great episode. Sure, I had some criticisms, and there are still some issues with the season as a whole that I'll discuss when it's all over, but the last last 2 episodes of every season have always been great. Rick Famuyiwa has done amazing work this season so far. It's so easy to let go of those criticisms because they were minor, and this chapter was simply a blast to watch. So much fun. I can't wait for the finale in just 1 week. Let me know what you thought of the Spies in the comments, as well as who you think the Spies are, and whether or not you think we'll see Thrawn. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and consider checking out our Patreon page for video reactions and audio commentaries for every episode. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.